It's great to be back with you and much appreciate the opportunity to be learning with you. As is our practice in general, we're going to start with a meditation. So I think you'll be seeing now a painting by John Petty that dates from 1884. It's entitled The Vigil. It's oil on canvas and it's at the Tate Gallery in London, England. Just take in this inspiring image. We've talked earlier about knighthood and its great importance to us as students on the mystical path. You know, one of the practices in during the Middle Ages in the knighting ceremony was that the knight would spend an all-night vigil, praying, meditating, and in watchfulness by their armor, prepare themselves for their sacred duties as a knight. Similarly, in our own life and our own passage through life, we're so similarly called. So taking in this inspiring image, let's have an opportunity to do some meditation before we begin our presentation entitled Embracing the Ennobling Lesson. So when you're ready, I invite you to close your eyes. Sit comfortably. You wish to have your palms down in your lap, your spine upright so you can have uninhibited or unaffected breathing. Feet flat on the floor, sort of well grounded in the earth. And start taking some deep breaths, just at the regular pace that you normally breathe. You may find it helpful to breathe through the nostrils and not through the mouth for a while, if that's comfortable for you, because that forces us to breathe deeply, taking the vital life force of the cosmic essence deep into our lungs. Just feel the beautiful rhythm of the breath. It's one of the wonderful functions of the temple of the Holy Master, which is our body, and the Master within, housed and resident there and beyond there. Feel how that rhythmic breath connects you with all the rhythms throughout the cosmic keyboard in the cosmos. Breathing is a very simple act, but it's a very profound one. I think you'll notice, particularly as you exhale and before you feel the tug to breathe in again, that there's a relaxation response to the vagus nerve in our body. It's all part of the wonderful harmonium and wisdom of the body. Just continue to breathe gently, but deeply. You may start to feel the invigoration of the cosmic essence or the vital life force in various parts of your body, like the toes, your fingers. It's enriching and healing, helping make us whole. If you find the mind wandering, just lovingly and gently bring it back to the attention of the breath. No judgment, it's all part of the process. You can think of coming back to the breath like a push-up in calisthenics or exercise. You're strengthening the mind, you're strengthening your attentional control. That attentional control is fundamental. Our ability to concentrate allows us to have what psychologists call self-efficacy. Various wonderful things happen as we meditate. There's an anti-inflammatory response, and soon the theta waves in the brain kick in, which have a wonderful integrative function that allow us to feel less scattered, more centered and whole, not only physically, but psychologically and overall spiritually. Enjoy these experiences. Take this time to continue to let go of the cares of the day. Feel this as a time to be recharged, rejuvenated, all the more stronger to return after the meditation and this presentation to take up one's duties and ultimately fulfill one's mission in life. Fundamentally, meditation is about dwelling in silence, particularly the inner silence, where we can commune with the God within, the divine within, the master within. Just continue to enjoy the rhythm of the breath in harmony with the vibrations of the cosmos. Now you may wish to continue just with the rhythm of the breath, but also invite you now to see your mind expanding out beyond the room you're in, beyond the town or immediate geographic location you are in, beyond the province or state you're in, beyond the continent and hemisphere that you're in, beyond the earth, expanding out beyond the solar system itself, expanding out beyond the Milky Way galaxy, our great home, to take in the entirety of the cosmos. And be one with the cosmic mind back of the cosmos. Be the cosmic mind. Assume the cosmic mind. Feel the exhilaration of, and the ecstasy of being one with the cosmic mind, where all is known and all are loved. But during this experience of being one with the cosmic mind, let us radiate love and well-being to all in need at this time. All those who've petitioned the Grand Lodge or affiliate bodies, the Rosicrucian Order AMORC, for metaphysical aid, all those frontline workers in the health field, and all those in need on Earth and beyond, all sentient beings. Radiate love and well-being. Feel it flow from you, easily and lovingly and powerfully. Now gradually, we'll close this period of meditation, but have a sense that this attunement with the cosmic is ever with us. It is our birthright. Helps guide us throughout life, helps learn and embrace the ennobling lessons of life. Thankful for this opportunity to be of service and radiating love and well-being, this metaphysical aid to all those in need. Let us gradually return to a more balanced state of consciousness, combining the objective mind, the subjective mind, subconscious mind, and the cosmic mind as one unity in cosmic consciousness. And just before we open our eyes and stretch and so forth, let us say together, may the God of my heart sanctify this attunement of self with the cosmic. And we'll say as Rosicrucians do, so be it in truth, so mote it be. And when you're ready, open your eyes and we'll begin our presentation. Great. Now on the topic of embracing the ennobling lesson, let me say at the outset that we are here on earth. One could say the temple of the earth, in the temple of the body, to learn. Central to living is learning. And we'll focus in this presentation on learning the lessons of life, particularly the major ones that guide us in mastership. The Rosicrucians have many keys to assist us in this matter. One of the important concepts of the Rosicrucians is that of the soul personality. The soul personality is what is evolving and maturing as we pass through this life. And if one is inclined to the doctrine of reincarnation, through incarnations. The soul personality can be thought of like a mirror. And as we learn lessons, as we mature and grow, we're polishing that mirror so that it can more greatly reflect the one soul and the divine that connects all of us. And that way we can be the living, radiant embodiment of the wisdom and majesty of the one soul. You know, past Imperator, Dr. H. Spencer Lewis encouraged us to embrace the lessons of life. Because sometimes for our outer self, it can be a situation where we may feel a little daunted, or we may feel a little overwhelmed or a lot of overwhelmed and would like to not embrace the situation. But I'll give some tips and suggestions and some laws and principles that can help with this. You know, sometimes too, we resist lessons and need to reach forward to embrace situations. I'm going to give you an example from colonial America, where there was a traditional Rosicrucian by the name of Ben. And when he was a young man, he relates this following experience that was highly formative lesson for him for the rest of his life. He knew a Quaker elder that he greatly respected. So imagine being told this by an elder you greatly respected. And I'll quote Ben now. Ben, you are impossible. Your opinions have a slap in them for everyone who differs with you. They have become so expensive that nobody cares for them. Your friends find they enjoy themselves better when you are not around. You know so much that no person can tell you anything. Indeed, no person is going to try, for the effort would lead only to discomfort and hard work. So you are not likely ever to know any more than you do now, which is very little. Now, Ben had a very powerful intellect, one of the most powerful one the United States has ever known. And he was strongly rebuked. You know, the master Yeshua, he would rebuke his disciples because he held them to a high standard and he expected them to hold themselves to an even higher standard. So this is part of what's going on. And we know that the Quaker tradition comes through the various persons that contacted the Rosicrucian teachings. George Fox, who was inspired for traditional Rosicrucian, Jacob Boehme, for example, the dwelling of the inner light. So this is a person who had a lot of wisdom. But one thing that was very good about Ben was he embraced this lesson. And he realized how ennobling it was for him. You see, soon after that experience, Ben crossed the threshold of the Rose Cross in colonial America through the foundation that Magister Kelpius and others had laid along the waters of the Wissahickon Creek, is what are now Fairmount Park in Philadelphia. And he learned that actually that he had an even greater elder within him that was available at all times, that would actually tend to be much more gentle and knew him much better. I'm speaking, of course, is what the Rosicrucians call the master within, which at first may seem a rather abstract concept, but once one has experienced it, one can see, wow, these Rosicrucians really know what they're talking about. This just wasn't a theory talking or a concept talking about the master within. It is there, it's real, and it's me. And truly more real than the sound of my voice or touching my body. It's always with us. Often its conveyances are surprising, but deep down, they're not surprising because it's who we've been all along. Of course, who am I speaking about, Ben? I think many of you have anticipated already, none other than the Rosicrucian sage, Benjamin Franklin. And from that lesson that he learned here, and there was actually many lessons in them, one of the ones was that he would be much more diplomatic, that the purpose of having a powerful intellect was not to belittle others, but to use it in service to others. Whatever strength we have is to use those for the well-being of others. So in the future, we'd listen well and patiently to others, just as he learned to listen to the master within. And he wouldn't need then to have a wise Quaker elder take him aside and rebuke him and point out important things to him. The master within would help him do that. And when we work with the master within, the inner self and the outer self, The outer self is ennobled and enriched and far stronger. The outer self never was in charge. The inner self is, for these large guiding lessons in life, for the large path and trajectory through our life. Ben would also use these insights to be of great service as a great statesperson, both in the United States and beyond. You know, each day is full of lessons if we are vigilant and receptive, like we saw that in that painting of the night, The Vigil by John Petty. Key points there is be vigilant and to be receptive, to be a good listener of others, but also to be a good listener of the master within. That is to always be on the lookout. As past Grand Master Raymond Andrea from England used to say, we need to recognize truth whenever we encounter it. Let me give you another example of this. When past Imperator H. Spencer Lewis was teaching students and guiding them, he would also often receive telegrams. I think many of you will remember telegrams. They used to be very common to receive messages by telegrams decades ago. And one day he received from Los Angeles the following telegram from a frater whose initials were JM. He recalled telegrams were very often very succinct because they were being charged by the word. It says, and I quote, "Need your help for JL, who is very ill, had 3 operations for tumor, but none found. Patient labors under the illusion of tumor. I gave one treatment which helped patient, and he was well for 3 weeks, then became violently ill. Again, please advise what to do." So you could imagine if you received a telegram like this, what would you do? Especially if you're in a position where people look for you for guidance. Well, the first thing that past Imperator Lewis realized was that you recognize truth, whatever form it may take. Now, the doctors, including the frater, who was a medical doctor, have been indicating to the patient, you don't have any tumor. We have had a great look in the temple of your body. However, past Imperator Lewis realized that this patient did have a tumor. And what he advised was along the following lines that you're familiar with in the Rosicrucian studies of actuality and reality. These are extremely important situations to realize. What past Imperator realized was that this person, had a tumor in reality, but not in actuality. Now, sometimes we may have a condition like a tumor in reality and actuality, or sometimes we'll have it in actuality, but we haven't realized it yet, so we don't have it in reality. These are very important concepts to realize. So what past Imperator advised Frater J.M. to do was that he needed to get the patient's confidence. And this is what past Imperator said he would do, is, he'd examine him and assure him that, yes, I can see you have a tumor. But this is a type of tumor that is not through surgery. We're going to have to dissolve it. And you see, he's choosing his wording very carefully. and they did dissolve it. Over time, he gave him some treatments, both like metaphysical aid like we did, but also could do contact treatment that the order teaches as well. That could have a general tonic effect. And by having the patient's confidence, and gradually the person would dissolve this reality. And there could be even more fundamental, lots of things here, setting up a new law in the subconscious. Replace the one that's giving rise to having the constant reality of a tumor. In this way, the tumor, over several weeks, completely cleared up. And when the patient, JL, said finally someone was taking what he said for real, he had great confidence in the practitioner. Now one can think, well, you know, that sounds like a rather extreme example. How does it apply to my life? Past Imperator Lewis went to pains to indicate to us, though, that this is highly applicable to our life. A substantial part of the people looking for health treatments, including the metaphysical aid of the Rosicrucian Order indicated, were a situation that had a condition in reality, not in actuality. And so we have to look in our life to this very important difference. The actuality is the actual rates of vibration that are involved in that full cosmic keyboard. But reality is how we're realizing that. And maybe the colors, the sounds, or interpreting experiences in our life. That's where the reality is. Gradually over time, we are able to move that reality to the actuality state. But these are very important ways that we come into lessons in our life. You know, an important part of learning is unlearning and letting go of what is unworthy and no longer serving us. There may be some things when we had earlier in our childhood, for example, our family, and we didn't have the full self-efficacy of an adult, or there's a degree of dependence. There are certain things we may have done as survival strategy or a strategy that no longer have relevance today to us, that need to be changed and unlearned, for example. I think you'll find too, if you look back over the years, there's lots of ways that you've learned and grown. It's easy to think at times, well, how much am I learning? Because we're a bit like past Imperator, past Grand Master Robert Daniels said, you know, our progress in spiritually is like being by the shore of a great lake. As you just look at it, over time, it may be increasing, but won't necessarily notice it. But we see the trajectory over the years. There's a great deal of wisdom growing when we apply ourselves, stay the course in the Rosicrucian teachings. Now, it's important that lessons need to be learned on all levels of our being. I'll give you an example, humility, which essentially means openness to learn. In a way, you could say from anywhere, anytime, anywhere. And that openness to be learned, to be humbled, has to be on a physical level. If we have a particular physical prowess, we're very good at athletics or whatever it is, we need to be humbled about that. You see, in life, we have essentially two choices in regard to humility, this openness to learn. Either we be humble, or we will be humbled. Life will teach us differently. And once we've got the lesson of being humbled physically, we'll need to be humbled intellectually, which is what Ben Franklin needed to learn with his powerful intellect. But also need to learn to be humbled in an emotional way, whatever strength or prowess that we have there. And ultimately be humbled spiritually. So in a way, it's like a mystic spiral we're going through as we rise up and gather these lessons. We need to have them at all levels of our being. You know, an important part in humility is from the earlier Rosicrucian Code of Life, which said that we're all child of the Rosicrucian studies. We're all children of the Rosicrucian studies. And indeed, we're not worthy even of Rosicrucian recognition. Now that can seem a little abrupt to the outer self, but when we take that in, I think it's something that's quite inspiring. It'll actually ennoble, uplift the outer self as well as our inner self. Very important part of all this important thing we need to be sure that we're not doing in our life is that we need to welcome and not resist the important lessons of life. I'll give you another example of where we've got to watch that we're not resisting the lessons of life. It's a very down-to-earth example, but it's also a very profound one, because part of mysticism is being both down-to-earth and very lofty at the same time. Doug Zahn, who's a statistician and a consultant, who's done a lot of work on the consulting relationship and our professional interactions. He mentions that in around 1984, he had saved up enough money for his prize 1969 Mustang to get fixed and painted up at a body shop and a restorer specialist. And when he finally got it back home, he was talking to his family members about it at dinner. His 9-year-old son, Derek, said to him, "Dad, some of the Mustang letters on the trunk are loose." Now, Doug said that the father said he reacted with annoyance, saying, "No, they're not, Derek. I just paid a lot of money to get the car fixed and painted. It's fine." The rest of the meal passed in silence. Now, a week later, Doug was at a gas station pumping gas and discovered that he was now the proud owner of a Moo Tang. The letters really were less loose, and S did fall off. So this is a very simple thing that one could brush off, but actually there's a tremendous amount about life and learning in this lesson, this matter here. You see, a little bit like Ben before him, he thought, what can a 9-year-old know about this? I've got my advanced graduate degrees, all these things. Also, he realized that I was too sure I was right about my choice of body shops to check out new information. That's crucial, new information. I got annoyed. I did not stay in the conversation, open to the possibility that his information could be useful. So I think often you'll find in interactions in life, you'll find that things like this is what happen, and these are these lessons. I know Doug went on to say, for me, and I would agree with him, he said, for healthy relationships, there has to be an explicit commitment to respect the other, which includes considering his or her input. Also, to manage my emotions. And very importantly, stay in the conversation. He realized that if any one of these commitments would have saved the S. And it could have, in the future, it could be something more substantial, as his young son could have told him something about the brakes. And you could see, poetically speaking, you could say that the brakes are a lot less forgiving than letter S is falling off. Or various other input we can get in our life. These are very important things. We can have these smaller lessons in life help us greatly in the bigger ones. There used to be an ad on television by an actor portraying a car mechanic, and he held up a spark plug, and he said, advertising a particular spark plug, he said, "You can pay me a little now, or you can pay me a lot later." We have to realize that throughout our life, there's telltale signs that there's things that we need to do. They could be symptoms like pain. We know as Rosicrucians, pain, whether it's psychological or physical, for example, is a warning sign to us as an important function to heed. There's typically, I'll find when you things that sort of became unduly stressful or very upsetting or got off track in your life, I think you'll find when you look back in reflection, there was various telltale signs. And when you learn those telltale signs, you learn how to avoid those in the future. But also, like past Grand Master Robert Daniels used to emphasize to us, it's important to learn lessons not only from the painful experiences or ones where we suffered, but also from the uplifting experiences. They teach us just as much, and how to have those and how that type of harmonium in our lives. See, you know, a lot of this type of thing, we can sometimes get caught up in looking back and regret in our lives. Now, it's true in a certain sense, we can't change the past, but we can change our interpretation of it. This is key. And the way that we change our interpretation of it is through the mature guidance of the master within. And in this manner, we're no longer held back in regret or attracting inharmonious conditions. Rather, we are enriched and ennobled and on track on the mystical path, ready to assist others in service through the same conditions and this greatest of all adventures. We won't get the full lesson until we've assisted another through that experience. Now, very important, we need to make practice of consistently and carefully listening to others and observing their strengths, just as we do with the master within. I can remember once when I was taking a university course, there was a person in the course who was wonderfully assertive. And assertive is a very healthy thing. It's part of our being whole. It's part of the way we avoid being ill. It was great. And it wasn't just, okay, there's an assertive person in the class. I realized this is an opportunity. This person's showing us an example. They were modeling to us assertiveness. We always need to be on the lookout for lessons. And one of the ways we do that is when we see somebody with a strength, observe them closely. How are they doing that? We're seeing self-mastery, which is what we're called to in our life. So I learned a lot about assertiveness from that person, as well as what the teacher was presenting on as a professor. You know, often when we, and it's important to listen to anyone, just like the child that Doug, the consultant, learned when listening to his son, Derek. It's also very important to listen to elders, particularly if they're ones that are very wise. And that's, you know, in a traditional culture, typically what was done is that when you spoke with an elder, you would let them do most of the talking. Now, often we want to ask our question and get them, but if we've got an extended opportunity to talk, through their attunement with the cosmic, they'll sense what is on our minds when they attune with us. And they will say indirectly, through a story or through their own experience, what we need to learn. Now, it's very important, as past Imperator Christian Bard indicated, whatever culture we were upbringing, was our upbringing, or whatever language is our first language upbringing, it's good to have an in-depth understanding of those things, because that's the purpose of why we incarnated in that culture and in that land or in that place with that background. And part of the way that we'll come into deeper mystical understanding will be through the heart or the depth of that culture. And all cultures have it. And the Rosicrucian teachings will give us the tools to do that as part of our growth in mystical understanding. And you know, the thing that also can seem daunting to us for learning the lessons of life is that often things will appear harder than they actually are at first. The outer self will often have the experience like, wow, I've never faced anything like that before. What can I do? But when we use our various faculties that the Rosicrucian Order helps us with, you know, inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning through the subjective conscious, for example, the practices of contemplation, which we had an earlier Rosicrucian TV recording of now, or you saw earlier. You can think of contemplation as going into that borderline state that we learn about in the Rosicrucian Order. And it's a state where we can communicate with the outer self, can communicate with the inner self. It's closely allied to meditation. In meditation, we commune with the inner self. And when we do contemplation and meditation as a combination, it's a very powerful way to learn the lessons of life, because the outer self and the sense impressions will give us those experiences with people and things, and the wise elder or the master within will give direction in regard to them. And that way, when I do that, we'll actually have an experience of the rose unfolding on us, because in a way we can think of ourselves as a great rosy cross. At the heart is the rose unfolding, maturing, evolving. You know, throughout this process, confidence is crucial, and meditation will help us with that. And as we have impressions for the master within, it'll help us with having that confidence to learn. I know things may have been heard earlier in our life and we've been downplayed, our sense of well-being and so forth, that we have to purge and unlearn. That's when we do have that strong base in self-confidence. You know, I remember once a person who had a lot of psychological insight and was a counselor I mentioned to him about, you know, there's a lot of things that I'd like to do that are all very valuable, and you know, you know, how do you pick and choose them on the inner spiritual level? You know, we have infinite resources there, but outwardly we have to pick and choose some as to our path to take up in various projects. And one thing he mentioned was, well, choose the most difficult one. If you have a choice of several that you're thinking about. The outer self generally doesn't want to hear that kind of advice, but that's the one where we're going to get the greatest lesson. We're going to have the greatest enrichment from. You know, often there are things that we may have backed away from facing in our life. For some people, it might be driving their car on a super highway where it's faster than city streets. For another, it might be getting into a relationship because it's a long-term commitment. For others, it might be getting up in public speaking. Whatever it is, one will know inside oneself what it is. But I can assure you, whatever it is, the harder it is to face it, the greater the polishing of the mirror of the soul personality be, the greater the breakthrough in our living. You know, often sometimes it's emphasized about how in mysticism there's great breakthroughs and illumination and experience of mystical union. That's true, but the whole process underlying is gradual. It's a little bit like when there's a fire burning in a woods, and the woods comes to a river. As the fire builds up in its intensity, there can be a point where it'll leap the river, and it'll appear like suddenly the fire will be on the other side. That's why we have breakthroughs in illumination. But to have that illumination, there's been all that practicing of the Rosicrucian teachings. There's been following all those spiritual lessons, doing the contemplation and meditation. It's been a gradual build up for the leap to happen. And that one of the greatest of all lessons can occur then. You know, an important part of learning a lesson in life, and one of the signs that you know you've learned it, generally it's going to be clear and simple. It'll be like a pure alchemical distillation. The complicating factors were of the outer mind and its finite grasp. It works on the finite plane, unlike the master within, who works on the infinite plane. And in this expansion of self-awareness, one is reminded of the words of the Pranayas mystical convocation. Know thyself. This is ever the purpose of each Rosicrucian. A very important complement or adjunct to that is to trust thyself. You know, there are telltale signs of having learned the right lesson in life. In other words, a rose unfolding within us, and we're keeping on track on the mystical path. There'll be an element of surprise, sometimes astonishment at what has been learned. One feels uplifted and ennobled. One's enthusiasm and capacity to love others is increased. One becomes intensely down to earth in being with and understanding others. At the same time, we become much more expansive and lofty in our thoughts, ideals, and capacity to radiate well-being. One's idealism grows as one's practical approach of life is also increased. Also, we must immediately put the lesson in practice in accordance with conscience, and which make living more meaningful and efficient. In this manner, we can be anchored in our lives through touch-tone transformative experiences. You know, there's a Rosicrucian adage to dare to do, and the strength will be given unto you. That's always an important one to keep in mind to bolster the outer self. And when the inner self sees the outer self working with it in good conscience, great strength will come forward. What was seeming impossible will become possible. You know, a mature person understands him or herself from the larger perspective and wisdom of the cosmic and the macrocosm. And at the same time knows his or her experience is representative of all experience. We're going to close in a moment and have some discussion, but I want to leave with you a helpful exercise on contemplation. It can be summarized as follows. First, take time out daily, at least 10 minutes for contemplation and reflection. And go with whatever is uppermost in your mind. And as a helpful supplement, write it down in a notebook and review it later. And have a period of meditation, either immediately before or immediately after the period of contemplation. I want to give you sort of one final experience for the lesson, because it can occur any place, any time. I remember being at some classical dance lessons. We had a wonderful teacher. He was very gentle with us, very knowledgeable. He could point out details and overarching things. And I remember once him mentioning to us a particular lesson he had from his teacher. And when he started to speak, it was like the room became still, very quiet. And he said there was points where he was amazed by his teacher in dance. And he said to his teacher, "How did you ever get to be so good at this? How can I ever be this good?" His teacher said back to him, "You think I'm good. You should have seen my teacher." And when he said that, inwardly, I sensed in a psychic way, it was like our dance teacher was now the embodiment of the traditional Rosicrucian Louis Claude de Saint-Martin. And even one of the students in the class looked like past Imperator, Christian Bernard. So it was like the Imperator was witnessing this with me. It was like Louis Claude de Saint-Martin, the unknown master, saying, "You should have seen my master, the august master, Martinus Pasquale, a traditional Rosicrucian, who said about his most powerful master, you should have seen him in his ability and strength." And from that, it was a very inspiring experience, because one suggests the esoteric current that goes deep down through us as an initiatic mystical order. But if one hangs in and starts not to analyze the experiences, sometimes we go from an intellectual enlightenment to a psychic enlightenment to the mystical enlightenment, because then there was a tremendous sense of oneness and love. You know, sometimes it's hard to bear how much love there is when the cosmic consciousness floods into us and forever changes us. And we're one with the one, and we experience eternity now. So let me say then, on this matter of embracing the ennobling lesson, as we mature, evolve, and unfold the petals of the rose, our understanding becomes expansive, timeless, universal. Our way of life becomes wholesome, life-affirming, and healthy in the manner fully intended for humanity, mission, and purpose on earth. In this manner, we learn the ennobling lessons of life and are the living, radiant embodiment of them for our health and well-being, as an inspiring example to others in service and in mystical union with the divine. Thank you. Allow Karen now to you to unmute if you wish to make a comment before we, or a question before we finish up, or you want to type something in the chat. I know she'll enable that as well.
Greetings, Frater. I just had a quick question on when we left off last time on meditation. What are your thoughts on fasting during long periods of meditation? Is it safe to perhaps go through a period where you can, like starve yourself for long periods of time? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, with everything in moderation, so we're always applying the law of balance. If you are, if you're physically in good health, you can check with a health professional about this as well, of course. It can be quite valuable to fast, for example, for a day and concentrate on one's inner spiritual nature. Going beyond that, though, that can become a concern, and it's not something generally recommended within the Rosicrucian Order, but during a day can be fine, where you could just say take some water and cleanse oneself. But fasting is an important spiritual practice, yes, done in balance. And it will help your meditation. It will give you more of a deeper sense of a spiritual being, yes.
Thank you.
I thought we always became out of balance in the spiritual before it manifested in the physical. That's been my understanding.
Yes.
And I thought you said that the tumor that the person had was the reverse of that. So I'm a little bit confused about that.
No, you're right. It's not the reverse of it. There were certain ideas and concepts and certain laws in this person's subconscious that led them to be fixated on having a tumor and experiencing it as if it was in their body. But it was definitely a phenomena associated with the subconscious that then moved out from there.
Thank you.
Hello, Frater Hugh.
Yes, greetings.
Frater Doug here. You'll save me from sending another email, but thank you once again for just pure Rosicrucian principles from the very start right up to every comment you continue to make. So it's like a spiritual glow I'm sitting in. Just wonderful listening to you with these principles again. So before I start gushing anymore, I'll turn it over to the next commenter.
Well, I know we both feel very strongly, but we're so fortunate to have the Rosicrucian Order in our life and stay the course with its teaching. Thank you.
Thank you, Frater Hugh. It was very enlightening as usual. This is Linda. I just wanted to say now I can say you should have seen my teacher.
All right. All right, very much so. I wonder, sorry, Karen, is there some comments that in the or questions in the group chat that I should address, or are we doing okay?
I've got a question.
There are
Okay,
a few.
How important is balancing the physical as well as the mental as well as the spiritual all together? Should one be above another, or should they all equally be balanced?
All equally balanced. And the surprising thing that we find out about that is we come into the deepest spirituality when we're balanced on all levels. It's true that spirituality is founded first and foremost in mysticism, in the one being one with the one, experiencing the cosmic consciousness. That's very true. But those things are all supported by having the balance through the physical, the mental, emotional, and psychic, and the spiritual. And we'll find that, when we can be very efficient in service, that'll even deepen our mystical experiences. So yeah, yes. And these are important things to learn anytime in one's life, but the younger one is, when one learns them, the better.
Harmonious.
Inspiring presentation, Frater Hugh. Thank you. This is Antoinette here. Thank you for a very inspiring presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Thor. Great to be with you and learning with you.
Yeah, thank you, Hugh. That was beautiful. There is a question in the chat from and this is what he wrote. How is it then when someone spends most of their life healing old wounds and only comes to the various mystical lessons as a senior? It feels like knowledge that would have been very useful as a young man.
Yes, very true. There can be various things involved in that. One thing can be sometimes we have to work to heal those wounds before we're deeply receptive to mysticism and the study of mysticism. You see, yes, if one isn't resisting being receptive to the master within, and one contacts the Rosicrucian Order or similar, sometimes that will help. But you have to be look back and see right now to what degree was one resisting lessons and not being open to those spiritual lessons. I see there's a question here about, does this relate to the philosophical theory rise of the phoenix? Very much so, yes. Out of the ashes we rise, very much so.
Someone wants to know, how do you get a copy of the recording?
Greetings.
One of the frater Ramirez wants to know, how do you get a copy of this recording?
Okay, through Sora Karen will talk about that as well. But Rosicrucian TV on YouTube. It'll typically these Department of Instruction teleconferences are posted there several days later, so you can access them there.
Okay, thanks.
You,
Yes.
it's Heather. Does one have to be physically in service to others, or can one do it from one's home? Or
Yes, you can. You'll see in your conscience, what is best and most reasonable for you, taking account of your health and so forth. So one of the first things you can do, and we can always be doing, is the world is in great need of metaphysical aid. So you can do that regularly, multiple times a day, and have the thought that it will continue to radiate from you. So you can always do that. I know a lot of things have been made more easily through various modern technology to reach out to others through telephone and through the internet in various ways. But yeah, there's a variety of things that you can do in service just around one's home.
thank you.
I've got one more question.
Yes.
So, you know how monks, usually they leave society, they step away from society, and in turn, I think that they are separating themselves from the whole, because we're all
Yeah.
connected in some way, you know what I mean? And do you think now more than ever we should be connecting versus separating ourselves from society?
Yeah, well, it's, in terms of a person's individual life, it's sometimes if they did a lot of outward things for many years, that sometimes there may be value to be more inward, but ultimately in the long run, you've got to balance it. And so mini retreats like meditation, for example, or a retreat for a few days, that can be okay, but generally you need to be in the world, but taking that time to attune with the God within on a regular basis. Yes, that's very, very much needed. And you'll find the deepest spirituality and the greatest service and the greatest maturity is going to come out from being active in the world, but also having those active times to turn inward. And this is greatly needed. It's always been needed very strongly. Maybe we'll finish up now, because I know we're just around half point on the hour. But I want to thank you so much for being with us, and I wish you all well, and we'll see you next time.